Welcome back to That's Life with John Carver. Today I want to share some thoughts with you on getting unstuck in your life. Again, getting unstuck in your life. A lot of people that I've met, including this guy right in the mirror, there was a time in my life that I was stuck. I was afraid of stepping out and doing some things that were beyond my comfort zone, that was beyond what I was used to doing and beyond what I was trained to do at the time. So I'm hoping that by the end of this episode today, that you're going to hear a story or two or three, or some ideas or some quotes or some bit of information that can help you get unstuck in your life. The slogan of the British Special Forces is "Who dares wins." Again, who dares wins. There's an African proverb that I read some time ago that says, "Don't look where you fell, look where you slipped." Don't look where you fell, look where you slipped. How many times haven't you been involved in relationships, whether you were a child or an adult, and somebody planted a seed in your mind that you couldn't do a certain thing, or you couldn't overcome a certain challenge, or maybe you aren't smart enough in their eyes to do something that is extraordinary. So again, that African proverb, don't look where you fell, look where you slipped. It's very important for you to look at the seeds that have been planted in your mind and in your soul to really see who planted those discouragement seeds and those thoughts that have hindered you from moving forward in your life. A gentleman named George Adair said one time, "Everything you've ever wanted is on the other side of fear. Everything you've ever wanted is on the other side of fear." I'll bet that there's not just one person watching this episode today that has struggled with fear. Fear of doing things that are maybe beyond what you think you can do, maybe having conversations with people about certain things. Maybe for some time you've been afraid to approach certain businesses or certain individuals and having those hard conversations. Or maybe building a friendship with somebody that, frankly, that person doesn't look like you or they don't behave like you, but you are interested in that person, and that fear has been blocking you considerably. The great race car driver, Mario Andretti, said one time, "If everything seems under control, you're just not going fast enough." Again, if everything seems under control, you're just not going fast enough. The older I get, and I would suggest to you that the older you get, it seems that the clock is ticking faster. Have you ever noticed that in your own life? You figure way back when you were a kid, you would think about Christmas time and the holidays, and it would seem like it would drag by through the year in order for Christmas to come. Well, the older you get, the older I get, it seems like the holidays are here before you know it. It's like it seems to be like 3 months away when it's obviously 12 months between one holiday and the next. So I'm thinking about times in your life when you have really started slowing down in your own life because of intimidation, because of fear, because maybe you cannot imagine yourself doing something that is maybe in your mind extraordinary. Maybe no one in your family has ever done what you want to do in your life. I'm suggesting to you that if you really want to get unstuck in your life, you're going to have to see yourself doing things that maybe you have never seen yourself doing before. The great boxer Muhammad Ali said one time, "Impossible is just a big word thrown around by small men who find it easier to live in the world they've been given than to explore the power they have to change it." He goes on, "Impossible," he says, "is not a fact. It's not a fact. It's an opinion. Impossible is not a declaration, it's a dare," he says. "Impossible is potential. Impossible is temporary." He ends that quote with, "Impossible is nothing. Impossible is nothing." How many times haven't you thought that a certain task that you wanted to do was impossible? I was online just 2 nights ago or so, and I was coaching some people that have been challenged in specific areas in their life. They literally could not see themselves doing certain things because of specific challenges that they have. So I had to share part of my story that as a result of certain things happening in my life, I had to visualize what wasn't possible at the moment. I had to visualize what I wanted to happen long before it ever happened at all. And I would recommend that same thing in your own life, that there are times that you have to imagine what's not there before you can actually embrace it, before you can see it. So you really have to, in essence, you have to see it before you can see it. What you see around me and behind me all started on a piece of paper or in some sort of document before any of the tile was laid, any of the artwork was put up, and certainly the lights were hung up. All that was all planned before it actually happened, and so much more for us in our lives. You need to have a plan. You need to have an agenda. There's an ancient story about a guy who was very, very sick, and he would wait around for, the story says, the tale says, for years and years, for somebody to move him from A to B, that he felt that at that time that he could not move himself from A to B as a result of the challenge that he was going through at the time. He assumed that he didn't have the power within him. He assumed that he was too weak and didn't have the mental capacity and didn't have the skill sets to move from A to B. So he waited, the story says, for over 30 years for somebody to move him from A to B. Well, there came a time when somebody asked, he said, well, why don't you just do what you need to do to go from A to B? He says, well, I don't have anybody here that will help me. I wonder how many people that you know, maybe you, that are waiting for somebody to see your potential and come alongside you and help you, instead of you seeing your own potential, getting a game plan together, getting a blueprint together, some goals, some things in writing, with a deadline, by the way, that you have to get this done, and then you begin that journey to make these things happen with or without assistance. I'm telling you, the most successful people that I've read about and some of the most successful people that I've ever known have decided to begin the journey before they even had a team of people around them that will help them achieve certain goals in their own lives. There seems to be, in a lot of people's minds, that there's only one way to do certain things, that there's only one way to accomplish the goals that they have in their own lives, when in fact there's probably more than a few ways to accomplish the goals and the dreams that they're trying to overtake in their own lives. Sometimes we get this narrow vision, this tunnel point of view, that we can only see what's right in front of us, when in fact all around us there's opportunities and people and material and ideas and concepts and seed thoughts, if you will, that will help you reach a level of production and success that you haven't even imagined yet. But you have to take the blinders off if you really want to experience some of the grandeur, if you will, of success that a lot of us have achieved over the years. We often assume that there's only one way to do certain things, but what if you were able to read information about people who have been there and done that? For the last, probably the last 10 years or so, I've always been getting these book summaries that I think they're called executive book summaries that I get every month. And in them are summaries of some really, really good business books. I have hundreds of them now. So I can go through these summaries and pick out what I'll call seed thoughts that I can transfer into what I'm trying to accomplish for my own personal goals and my own personal dreams. Because if I can pick a tool or pick a bit of information, or some people call it a springboard, use a paragraph or a sentence or an idea from somebody much smarter than you and me, that can really grow and blossom in areas that we haven't really done anything so far. Oprah Winfrey said one time, "It's time for you to break on through," she says, "getting unstuck and do that thing you've been aching to do." She goes on, nothing happens until you decide. Nothing happens until you decide. Years ago on my show, a young mom shared her frustration with getting her son to go to bed. Her son was 3 and ruling the house. He wanted to sleep in her bed and refused to lie down in his own. The more the mother insisted, the more the child resisted. yelling and screaming and literally dropping from exhaustion. We showed a tape of the two of them wrestling it out. So when our expert, Dr. Stanley, finished watching, he said something that made the hairs on my arm stand up. Quote, "Nothing happens until you decide." The reason her 3-year-old didn't sleep in his own bed was that the mother had not decided it would happen. When she did, the child would go to his bed. He might cry and scream and rant until he fell asleep, but he would eventually realize that his mother had made up her mind. Sometimes, in order to get unstuck, we have to be willing to do the ridiculous. Let me give you a sillier example. Years ago, in my sales career, I was very intimidated about approaching wealthy people. I mean, really intimidated. I had a very bad stutter at the time, and it was terrifying. I had no problem dealing with people that were in a certain social economic background that were not wealthy. They were just average Americans, if you will, not high income earners. So one day I decided that I had to overcome, at least attempt to begin to overcome, this anxiety of approaching rich people. So what I did was I got in it was a 1986 Cutlass Supreme that had some hubcaps missing because I was in a certain neighborhood in Baltimore, Maryland, and some people in the neighborhood stole 2 of my hubcaps. Oh well, I didn't replace the hubcaps. I just drove my 1986 Cutlass Supreme up to an area north of Baltimore City in Maryland called Hunt Valley. Hunt Valley was at that time, upper crust, upper income type of neighborhoods up there. So what I did was I parked the car. Yes, hubcaps missing and all. So obviously my car didn't fit in, but I just went knocking on doors in my sales career, because that day, I don't know where it came from, I don't remember, but that day I decided to overcome my fear of approaching well-to-do people that earned way, way more than I was earning at the time. And ever since, I realized relatively quickly that day that they're just like me. They just have a different job, they have a higher income, maybe a better education, maybe there's more than reason to figure out where their income's coming from. I don't know the details, obviously, but they're just like you and me. So the point is that sometimes you gotta chance looking ridiculous in order to reach certain goals that maybe you would not have been able to reach if you weren't willing to fall on your face. There's been many times when I've fallen on my face trying to do things that I was not qualified to do at the time. Some people would call them bloopers. I've had many, probably dozens or hundreds of bloopers in my career whereby I've messed up. I can tell you when I was first in the insurance industry, I got into the insurance business in 1988. And I was, like I said moments ago, had a horrible stutter. And people would laugh at me, they'd slam doors in my face, they would tease me, they'd ridicule me because of my speech challenge. And I had quit, in quotes, that career many times. No, did I physically resign? No, but mentally I quit because I was just so sick and tired of being teased and harassed. But I was always one of the top 3 or 4 sales reps in any office I was in at the time, because I didn't allow, over a period of time, I didn't allow the frustration of my challenge to get in my way from achieving the goals that I had to achieve for my family at the time. So I'm wondering if that's the same thing for you. You're afraid of looking foolish in your endeavor to do some really cool things in your life. Because if you are afraid of looking foolish when you're attempting to do great things in your life, it's unlikely that you're going to really reach the pinnacle of where you can really achieve in your life, because you're afraid of looking silly in front of people that may laugh at you. Guess what? Every single person who's ever achieved anything great in life has been laughed at. Every single person who's ever achieved anything that's extraordinary have been ridiculed by people that frankly can't get out of their own way. I wonder how many times that you've been tempted to try something that's extraordinary, but you decided, you know what, I'm not going to do this because my cousin's going to laugh at me. Or my family's going to think that I'm all that. I'm just trying to do something that's beyond the scope of what anybody in my family's ever done. Let me share another ancient tale. There was this guy that was gifted, if you will, in a certain skill set. Well, he came to this gentleman who needed what he was good at, and he suggested to this guy that if you do this, you're going to get this benefit from this information that I'm sharing with you. So the guy that was being coached by this expert looked at what this guy was saying. He's saying, I'm not going to do this because I'm going to look really stupid. And what he asked him to do was, it was beyond the norm, let me put it that way. I'm not going to get into the details of it, but it was definitely beyond the norm because nobody had really ever done that before, at least not in the circle that he was with. And oh, by the way, this guy that was being coached, he was being watched by a lot of people. He was like a very important guy in his region. So for him to follow the advice of this guy, this other guy who did not have the status, if you will, of lots of employees around him, it would not have meant too much. But this guy, the guy that was being coached, his name's Naaman, by the way, and he would look at this teacher, this instructor, and he had to reach a point in his life that he had to either follow through with what the teacher was recommending and continue or to overcome this challenge, or to remain in the struggle that he was doing and what he was struggling with for a lot of years. And I think that kind of goes along with what you go through sometimes, or maybe have gone through. And that is, there are people in your world, whether it's from these programs or from my weekly blog that I send out to several thousand people a week. It's a weekly email that I do, just to share information and stories and concepts to help people. Maybe it's that, or maybe it's somebody in your neighborhood or workplace that's really smart and they're giving you really practical advice. But you know what? That advice is going to potentially place you in a situation that you're going to be doing something that you've never done before. It's very uncomfortable. It's in fact intimidating, and you just don't want to look silly in front of your friends. Years ago, many years ago, when I was about 8 years old, I was asked by my music instructor to play the guitar in front of a cafeteria full of parents and teachers. And a young boy that was my age, his name's David, and he would sing a song. I wrote the song, I play the guitar, and David would sing the song because I can't sing. So I got up there and I'm playing the thing, and of course we rehearsed, but the whole time I was terrified. I was 8 years old, terrified to do this thing. But then we got standing ovation, people applauded. The point is that sometimes when you do something that is scary, initially it's terrifying. It just freezes you in your place. But once you do it, you wonder, why was I afraid in the first place? Because after I did it, it was enjoyable, it was fun. It wasn't hard at all. Steve Ely writes, he says, during a practice session for the Green Bay Packers, things were not going well for Vince Lombardi's team. Lombardi singled out one big guard for his failure to put out. It was hot and muggy when the coach called his guard aside and leveled his awesome vocal guns on him, as only Lombardi could. Son, you are a lousy football player. You're not blocking, you're not tackling, you're not putting out. As a matter of fact, it's all over for you today. Go take a shower. The big guard dropped his head and walked into the dressing room. 45 minutes later, when Lombardi walked in, he saw the big guard sitting with his hands in his face. He was just sobbing. His head bowed, and he was just sobbing his eyes out. Vince Lombardi, ever the changeable, but always the compassionate warrior, did something about, really in the sense of an about face, that was also typical of him. He walked over to his football player and put his arms around his shoulder and said this. He said, son, I told you the truth. You are a lousy football player. You're not blocking. You're not tackling. You're not putting out. However, in all fairness to you, I should have finished the story. He said this, inside of you, son, there is a great football player, and I'm going to stick by your side until the great football player inside of you has a chance to come out and assert himself. With these great words, Jerry Kramer straightened up and felt a big deal better. As a matter of fact, he felt so much better, he went on to become one of the all-time great football players and was voted in as an all-time guard. So I'm asking you that, are you surrounding yourself with people that will consistently tell you the truth? That's really important. Maybe you're a lousy football player. Maybe things aren't going the way you think they should be going. But those same people will tell you the truth in a way that will pull you out of that situation. I've shared this story before, but I'll share it again for you. A few years ago, I was having lunch with my friend Paul. And I was kind of whining a bit that I wanted to find ways to help more people, but I was in this box. I have the weekly email that I send out. I write for a newspaper in my area and among other things that we've done over the years. But I wasn't reaching enough people in my own mind. And he says, John, why don't you go to this studio in Westminster, Maryland, and talk to them about doing a TV show? It's like, Paul, come on. We're talking to a guy here who had a serious stutter. Yeah, it's gotten way better, as you might be able to tell, but it's still a handicap. It's still a challenge because I have to, anyway, I'm not going to get into it, but it still gets on my nerves. Let me put it that way. He says, why don't you just go talk to him? And I put it off. I mean, I've been by this studio hundreds of times, and I was afraid to walk in the door. So he kept pushing, just kind of like Vince Lombardi did with this player, Kramer. He says, John, why don't you just go talk to them? Why don't you just kind of see how it works out and this and that? So one day I bit the bullet. I says, okay, I'm just going to go talk to them and see what's up and see what can happen. Longer story short now, as of this taping, I think we've taped about 159 programs so far. And as of this date, we're in 1.7 million homes per week. What if my friend Paul hadn't pushed? What if my friend Paul hadn't nudged me? How about what if my friend Paul hadn't, if you will, verbally sat down beside me and said, John, come on, you can do this. I believe in you, John. I'm trying to tell you today, in whatever dreams and goals that you have in your life, John Carver, believes in you that you can do it. But you've got to take those consistent steps every single day in order to do it. And very candidly, one of the reasons why we do the shows that we do, in addition to helping people, is because I don't want to fall back into that mindset of fear and anxiety. So if if you and I maintain the momentum of doing good things for other people, then fear has a less of a chance to grab a hold of you and stop you in your tracks because the fear can't catch you because of momentum. Think about that a minute. Fear will not be able to catch you because of the momentum, because of how fast you're going, because you're consistent in the efforts that you're trying to do every single day. So my job for you in these programs is to pull you beyond what you think you can be pulled from. That is your baggage, your pain, the anguish that you've gone through over the years in your own life. One of my jobs on these programs is to help pull you out of that muck, to pull you out of that quagmire, to pull you out of that concrete that you've really planted yourself into that you think you can't move. I'm telling you right now that there are so many things that you can do in your life. I'm asking you today to take some of the information that I've shared in this episode, that you can literally change your life in such a dramatic way. You must surround yourself with people who, A, will tell you the truth, and B, that will inspire you. Now, that may not be human beings, that is, buddies that come alongside you and physically put their arm around you. It's books, it's audio material, it's people that have been there and done that. If you will learn from these people and place yourself as students in their lives, you will be able to reach goals and dreams that will literally blow your mind. My name's John Carver. I believe in you. I know you can do this. If I can do this, look, I'm just a regular guy, okay? If I can do some of the things that I've been able to achieve with some really smart people around me, I never did it by myself. I have a great team of people around me, that you can do it too. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back real soon.